Deb O'Hara Rusckowski, thank you so much for joining me. You are a nurse who has, in recent years, become involved in human trafficking, in trying to rescue women and actually rescuing women, and training people in medical profession and elsewhere to know the signs of someone who's being trafficked. And you've worked at the UN with the Catholic Order of Malta as a delegate and special advisor to the ambassador on trafficking. Can you talk a little bit about that? And we're having this conversation in the context of this new movie that is apparently beating out Indiana Jones, The Sound of Freedom, that is a really well done movie. We both agree about the sex trafficking of children, and really a wake up call for people. Yeah, tell us a little bit about this and why it's so important for us to be paying attention.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathryn. It's a pleasure. And not only do I respect you as a colleague, and I appreciate more so our friendship. So thank you for having me. This is a real big issue. And you're right. The Sound of Freedom has opened up Pandora's box. And I am thrilled that more people will be educated. I started in this about a dozen years ago, 12 years ago, when I was moving from Boston to New York. And basically, I was finishing up a master's in theology and wondering what I was going to do with it. And so a professor had asked me, I hear you're going to New York, and what are you going to do? Nursing, business, and now theology. I said, well, I have a passion for healthcare. I have a few business skills, but I really want to do something with my faith and purposeful in my life. He said, would you like to work in the area of human trafficking at the UN? I was like, wow, that would cover all three. Now, that was back 12 years ago. I started under a terrific priest, Father Tom Brennan, who took me under his wing, showed me everything he knew. He was at the UN for 8 years. And then I had the opportunity 3 years later to become a delegate for the Order of Malta. And I asked them, I would love to, be honored if I only can stay in the area of anti-human trafficking work. And they said, absolutely, we'll have you covered on the third committee, which covers that as well as refugee crisis. Now, with that said, that did open up doors into meetings and various people that I never would have had a chance to. And one was Kevin Highland. Kevin Highland, a wonderful man. Anybody in the area of anti-human trafficking work will not recognize his name. And he is the former anti-slavery commissioner under Theresa May in the UK. He worked for Scotland Yard in law enforcement, focused on human trafficking, and he now is the CEO of Santa Marta Group with the Vatican. I tell you that because Kevin helped me create the Global Strategic Operatives. And it was all about the human trafficking world is so complex and so massive. I mean, when you tell the statistic, you say it's just gone up in the last 6 months to 50 million people worldwide. How do you really wrap your head around that? Right. And so this is something that when you have 50 million people, you really have to focus. So what we did was we held a day-long meeting at the UN with all the established leaders in this area field, as well as member states. And what we did was we worked at focusing on where do we start for training? And it came down to between healthcare and law enforcement. Healthcare won out mainly on evidence-based studies. 88 to 92% of all survivors state that they go through, they seek out medical care while being trafficked. And so that's why Global Strategic Operatives has focused on training healthcare providers internationally, nationally, and we're up to over 750,000 people already.
And so what does that look like if a woman is seeking, is it basic medical care?
It is, they could be seeking really anything. They could have a broken bone from a beating. They could have an infection from the sexual activity they're involved in. They could have, the prenatal care if they're pregnant. There are so many things that they can show up on the doorstep of an emergency department. And by the way, 68% of all of them go to the emergency department. That's where we focus, even though we have all the ancillary people trained as well, including security guards, including parking attendants, because they need to learn the signs and symptoms. These women oftentimes I'll say, show up with their trafficker. And their trafficker is someone that may not allow them to speak. Oh, she doesn't understand English. I'll speak for her. The first thing we train people is get those two apart. Get them, even if it's a urine sample, an x-ray, anything, any excuse, get them apart. And then try to ask trauma-informed questions and ask them what happened to her. And is she afraid and things like that. Oftentimes it's out of fear that they won't say anything because they've been threatened. Mostly they know they'll get a beating. However, it's mostly fear of retribution to their family that's being threatened. So they will do anything. So we tell the healthcare providers, it may take on average 7 times for that one person to come through and be ready to ask for help.
Well, that's something I've often wondered about. I was just in Grand Rapids and in the airport, as in many airports, there are signs in the ladies' rooms, right, about trafficking if you're being trafficked, and talking about signs of being trafficked. Are these things successful, or is it part of? Is it about like putting little seeds of hope?
Yeah, these are very, very successful. And the reason being is we worked with airline ambassadors, and that's a group started by Nancy Rivard, a former flight attendant who saw so much on flights. And so she decided to actually start training this is where I mean by you need to focus on which training. So even though we're healthcare, we've done training with the at Logan Airport, International Airport. We've done a few other things with airline ambassadors. There's other people that train the hospitality groups and in the hotels what to look for. Look for like a do not disturb sign on, after a man and a little boy go into a room and don't come out. This is terrible to hear, but it's even worse to really experience, right? So this is something that, and not just the hospitality, but then you have the healthcare, the hospitality, the law enforcement. They need to be trained. Most really good police departments have their own human trafficking task force, and they're I think the one in the country modeled after the one in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. They've done a great job there. So there's many other, several others. I'm meeting the people that are in Boston, and I'm so excited and honored to be working with them because they really they're very focused and they do the rescues. They're the ones that do the rescues. We're starting up safe homes now, but they bring them to us and they bring them to the hospital. And that's, yes.
What does the rescue look like, Deb?
Oh, the rescue looks like, okay. I may give you an example that's very tough to listen to, but I'm going to give it anyway. But this is what an example is.
Well, as you said, it's hard to hear, but it's harder to experience. Yes. So we need to hear it.
Yeah. So I'm just looking for my charger so I don't go out of battery here.
Oh gosh, so, we've all been there.
Yes. So don't mind if I, just look around here, but I can answer these questions. Let me share with you one story. A sting was happening. And this was I think it was a combination of FBI and Homeland Security, but they had the special agents in charge and they were all going undercover. They were going undercover to a place where they had young boys. And this was very difficult for most of the agents. And so they were undercover and they had to wait with their earbuds to hear, I got him, meaning the guy in charge, okay, the top trafficker. And so while they were waiting, there was the agent in with a young boy, and he had a son at home the same age as the boy, maybe 6, 7 years old. And so they were waiting, and he's making small talk. And then finally the young boy says, aren't you going to give me something? And he asked him, like, what do you mean? He says, well, all the others give me something so it doesn't hurt. Now that makes me sick every time I say it, but that at the moment he heard that came out of the little boy's mouth, he heard in his earbud, we got him. And he picked up the little boy and hugged him and said, no one is ever going to hurt you again.
Oh, wow.
And of course, the little boy didn't understand and he was afraid, but that was, and they all came piling out with the boys and the awful, the traffickers, and made a huge arrest and a huge sting. And from that point on, honestly, I have made a commitment in my heart and asked God for the strength to, as we start up homes and try and find more homes, we need homes for boys. It's a different type of shame. It's a different type of, depending on their age bracket. And they really need the help. Even though the majority are women and girls, the boys are now the new preferred commodity, which makes me sick, as it should anybody that loves children. So I tell you that's just one, but there's other stings that happen, other rescues that happen in such a way that, in the hospitals, they rescue them because they find out much more information. And if a woman is ready to open up, then they can call in the police and help the perpetrator get arrested. But they really take different forms in different places.
But one thing that the movie makes clear is that it's boys and girls.
Oh my gosh. And that's why I'm so happy about that movie, because that is really telling it like it is. Now, I will say one thing about the movie, that it does concentrate in Colombia, as we both know, and it's very powerful and very different in regards to the typical way children get involved in the United States. What do I mean by that? Well, you get involved when, let me give you an example. The example I can give you is our survivor that I've been working with for over 10 years, and her name's Jasmine. Jasmine was in the life for 8 years, but Jasmine was groomed. Excuse me while I plug myself in. Okay.
This is feminine genius. You're multitasking.
Yes, well, I apologize because I thought I was well juiced up, but okay. So now Jasmine is a wonderful survivor. She's been out, she was in the life for 8 years. She's been out for many years and very well healed. And she's a terrific spokesperson. However, she explains how she got into it. It was a boyfriend. It was a boyfriend she met through friends. And then she took him home to Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner, and they were talking about marriage. And the guy said, I truly want to marry you, but I just don't have enough money. And he proposed the idea of going to the massage parlor. Now, this is in Massachusetts, but the massage parlor was in Connecticut. And she said, no way, why would I ever do this? No way. Well, he worked on her, got her isolated from her family, and and then he brought her to another home where there were prostitutes and victims, obviously. But who did she meet there? But one of her dear best friends from high school. And she said, and they told her, the girlfriend, you need to talk Jasmine into this, because if you don't, we'll beat you at the end. So she was trying to tell her, it's really not so bad. Look at my clothes, look at my bags, look at my shoes. And at a 19-year-old girl was very, very influenced by that. And then she started doing it and she felt disgusted, wanted to stop. That's when the beatings started. And then a lot of the college age girls that we work together to go and talk to, they would ask Jasmine, but you weren't handcuffed to a bed. Why didn't you just leave? And she said, because he would tell me that of course, I know where your parents live and your brother lives. And so wouldn't it be sad if there was a fire at night and they were caught in it and destroyed the house and they died? She said, don't do anything to my family. I'll do whatever you need. That's grooming. It's a romantic, they get them to be romantically involved and have them fall in love with each other. But it's amazing when the stings happen, a lot of the girls have had the Stockholm syndrome, actually fall in love with their perpetrator. And then when they find out that they have the same pimp, they're ready to kill each other instead of the pimp. Oh, it's wow. And that's why people have such a hard time. Like it just takes anything normal or what you would think is common sense on its head. But these are girls that have had quotas, let's say $1,500 a day. They have to have almost 20 to 25 sexual experiences to get that money per day. And so forget about sexual, they've been raped. This is what we try to explain to people. Yes, crisis pregnancy, and this is why we don't put the crisis pregnancy girls together with the girls that have been trafficked. And the reason is both have needs, absolutely.
And both have trauma.
And both have trauma, but there's a different level of trauma of being raped 20 times a day versus, right. And we really have to respect that, and the level of dignity and self-esteem that has to be built up and redone and given is really profound in sex trafficking girls.
And how old are the girls that you're typically working with?
So right now, the average age is around 12.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
so, yeah, there are now, so they go up in age, but then they kind of age out when they're all used up, and the traffickers are like, done with you, because it's all about money. It's that's why we tell people, do not go after a trafficker. You call 911 or call the, it's this national hotline number, and I'll give that to you at the end. But this is something that is so dangerous. You're going after their commodity. You're going after their property. You're going after in their pocketbooks, in their wallets of what is making them money. And this is $150 billion profit business, according to the ILO, International Labor Organization. And this is a lot of money. Why is it so lucrative? Because you can sell drugs or firearms or weapons, but that's a one-time exchange. You invest in a person, you make money over and over and over again until they're all used up. And so this is why the cartels, they're all investing in human beings, and that's more lucrative. They may have a drug business on the side, they may have this on the side, and weapons on the side, but the human trafficking is skyrocketing. And so, we've seen it across Europe. We saw it with the Ukraine war, and the first ones to a natural disaster or a war are the human traffickers and not the humanitarians. And so we had to really get out there. We did a push communication on cell phones of beware of kidnappers, because that's what was happening. Unlike the grooming situation in the United States, that's so prevalent, over there is the kidnapping. And I'm glad that, Jim Caviezel and Tim Ballard and all the producers of Sound of Freedom, they all focused on that, because that is, but I don't want it to be deceiving. People if they think it all happens over there,
right?
And that's the way it's done, is kidnapping. That is true for over there. It was true in the Ukraine. The kids would go up for a blanket or some food and they would disappear. The women would get in a car because they were afraid of the buses, of where the government sanctioned buses would take them. Well, they got in the car and they were whisked off in the early stages of 4 or 5 weeks and never to be seen again. And now we've trained so many in Europe. Our colleagues in the Italian hospitals have thanked us because they never would have known the signs and symptoms had they not had this training just before the Ukraine war broke out. So this is making us feel very good in the sense that they were able to help them.
Well, one of the things to the point you were making a moment ago, I've watched a couple of interviews Jim Caviezel has done recently, and he always makes the point that the U.S. is one of the chief at this point businesses
Yes.
for this for using children.
Yes.
And so what more can people who become aware of this, that there's sex trafficking of children in the United States,
Yes.
because of this movie, what can people do? Because people don't want to know this because you feel powerless, but we're not powerless.
It's not good cocktail party.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
And my husband will often say to me, "Can you just go easy on what you do?" So it's true. When it comes to children, I just want to back up for a second. What you said was very profound. The United States, in the levels of the State Department, we have tiers, and we also have what's called places of origin, destination, and transit. And so you can look at a map, and I have a wonderful one done by Johns Hopkins International Studies, but it's a map of the flow of trafficking. So they may be where it's originated, where it's traveling through, and where they end up. Origin, transit, destination. Okay. The United States is all three.
Wow.
All three. And that's what makes what you said, the United States chief or top of the list of that origin, destination, transit. So with that said, people think it's all on the border. Yep, the top 3 states, maybe 4 now, California, Texas, Florida, and New York are equal. And why? They not only are on the border, but they also have international airports. They also have, that kind of busy city and the corridors in the United States. And a corridor is where there's a large expressway, turnpike, whatever, highway, and there's motels, and there's drug trade, and there's truckers, and there's demand for prostitutes, and it's a recipe ripe for human trafficking. 2 common, most notable corridors in the United States is from Milwaukee to Chicago, and then the other one is right down the 95 eastern border, okay? And then the other one is in Ohio, believe it or not. So people need to really—
Why Ohio?
A lot of isn't that funny? But for some reason, there was a large immigration immigrant place for immigrants to go, and for whatever reason, Ohio became a hotbed.
Wow.
I wish I had more information, and
I'll
get more for you. But that is. We're still learning about the hotbeds that are around the country. But this is, people need to be more aware, just like what's happening in the airports, what you just said. And they're saying, if you see something, say something. Nothing can be, all it can do is that, oh, it wasn't anything, but better to say something. You see, I hate to say it, but older married white men are the most common ones that are abusing this. And it's sad, and of course, that's just in general. Of course, there's a lot other outliers, but if you see an older man with a younger boy or a younger girl, a red flag should go up. And I feel bad saying that because, my husband's a grandpa and a papa, and we walk our grandchildren all the time. And that's not what I'm talking about. There are some things that are just a little bit off. And the child seems afraid and won't make eye contact. And they won't answer you, and they look down, and something's not right. That's when you need to, the best thing is probably locally the 911 call, and let the local police know where you are exactly, and they can go check it out. And if not, the national Polaris number is 888-373-888. I know that sounds funny, but that's the way it's easy to remember. 2 888s on either end with 3737 in the middle. And you can text Be Free. But those are the ways. I'll give one example of Marriott International. The former CEO, Arnie Sorensen, was so dedicated and passionate about this, was a very good man, God rest his soul. And he had all of Marriott trained, the entire Marriott International hotel chain. And you might say, well, does that do any good? You know what? It was housekeeping people that noticed that do not disturb sign. They made the report. They had somebody else in the management team call the police, came, and they came out with the man and the little boy. But do you know that story went like wildfire around the Marriott, all around the world, and people, the attrition rate plummeted because they felt so good about working for such a good company that would at first. So I say, everybody can do a little bit. A little girl found out that there was she was upset about when she learned that little kids were at gunpoint to mine for cocoa beans and chocolate. So she went to her school and asked that only free trade chocolate be used. And free trade meaning that it's certified, that it's human trafficking free, really. And same thing for, cotton and labor trafficking. People need to be aware, Black Friday. And I myself going up we walk up and down New York streets, and I love those knockoff bags, but I can't look at them the same way anymore. And so it's people getting educated and really knowing what to look for. And, the demand is there for this, and they really need to start teaching kids prevention. During COVID, sex trafficking of children skyrocketed. And the reason was because they were at home, they were isolated, they were lonely, their parents were stressed, maybe with financial issues or health issues. And so that 14-year-old boy that was online saying, do you want to play some video games with me? I'll meet you at the corner, really wasn't a 14-year-old boy. So these are the things that happen. And the prevention, we have curricula now that we're trying to get into schools. And it had a national pilot that showed excellent results. So the Order of Malta is now teaming up and trying to get the curriculum into schools K through 12. And it'll be age appropriate for each age, not talking about trafficking right away.
Right.
Just say no to somebody that's offering you a ride, and the basic things, and then getting into, as they get into high school, topics that refer to trafficking and what they have to do to be careful, especially online.
Deb, one of the things that I found especially jarring about the Sound of Freedom movie was that man who had been someone who had used children but didn't realize that he talks about his moment of kind of conversion where after he was drunk, and it sounded like he was some kind of contractor, and I understand that contractors in foreign countries are definitely make use of human trafficking, but he's drunk at a bar and he thinks this is somebody who's 18 or above, and then after they do the deed, as he says, he realizes she's 13.
Right. That's right.
And he talks about looking in her eyes and seeing all the sadness and realizing he's her sadness.
Right.
You know, I think when we think about sex trafficking, we think of it, not you because you're working in it, but as something foreign and something, you know, evil people do. But as you said, married men,
Yeah.
you know, there are people we know who engage in this in one way or another. And it starts with porn often, right?
Yes, absolutely. So you think about this, and kids, you know, parents might laugh off a boy checking out pornography online or a magazine and say, "Oh, it's just a rite of passage," right? They'll get over it. That's just that age, their hormones. But actually, we've learned more from the chemical, physiological, addictive hormones that are released with boys and girls when regarding this kind of activity. So this is really, it's now gotten to a huge, you know, worldwide problem, but it also, now we're, you know, we've legalized marijuana. We have, you know, we're going down a path and people, and it's fine, you know, people feel, you know, this isn't a problem. Well, as they normalize abnormal behavior in a sexual context, you know, it makes people a commodity. It makes, objectifies women and little girls, and they think it's no big deal. Thank God for that man and his ability to look in her eyes and see a person.
Right.
See a little girl. We have absolutely everyone is disposable. Everyone's not, you know, really a dignified person. We've lost the sanctity of life. We've lost that dignity. And like, you know, Pope Francis does say, you know, crime against humanity. This is their dignity that is stripped. And so they don't look at women and they don't look at children and they don't see the value. And whether or not they're on drugs or whether or not they're high or they're drinking, something is blocking that ability to see the person. And yes, it starts with pornography. And all the more reason we need to share with parents, get that stuff, block those sites, and explain to them. Whether you grew up in the 50s or 60s or whatever your mistakes were, don't pass it on to the next generation and learn from it and explain to them why it's wrong.
And it's also at a whole nother level now, you know.
Whole nother level. And I was shocked when I first started to learn, you know, I won't say where, but it was, this activity goes on at lunchtime in a state house. I'm like, what? And so it is right before our eyes, and with both girls and boys. And don't think it crosses all socioeconomic lines. And this is not just in the poorer neighborhoods. And this just isn't in, you know, people think, oh, I live in a nice neighborhood. Well, you know what? You may have a woman that's caught in labor trafficking and being held in that house with her passport not being given to her and dependent upon that family. So you really need to get educated on what's going on, all forms of trafficking. Sex is the most common, but there's labor. There's over 20 million people caught in labor trafficking. And so labor trafficking and then the organ trafficking is on the rise, which is so terrible. And of course, when I used to talk about that with the medical people, they'd say, well, we're in the United States. We have great regulations and regulatory bodies. But you know what? There's over 120,000 people on a wait list. That lends itself to, you know, the possibility of some corruption there. Right. So, and the things that are happening in India and China are probably the worst I've heard in regards to organ trafficking. So it's, that's on the rise. And this is not some topic that people really want to embrace. Right. But you know what? I would say when you start learning and you realize that your camera that is watching your child, you're downstairs and the camera's in the crib, you know what? Hackers can get into that. And that is the scariest thing. And all they have to do is watch your schedule. And if they have spotted a child on a playground, and then they watch the parents' day-to-day activities and get to know their routine, they know when that child's going to take a nap, and they know where to go and how to get that child. I'm not trying to scare the living daylights out of people, but this is the reality.
Mm-hmm.
They do get stolen. Is it common? Maybe not as much as the movie portrays in Colombia, but you know what? It sure happens enough that every one of us should be concerned.
And we have to be aware for the children who are caught up in this.
Yeah.
So you have a safe house you just started in Massachusetts.
Yes.
How can people help your efforts? And
oh my gosh, we need so much help. We truly do. We need volunteers, and we need help. It's called the O'Connell House. I can mention that. And we do, for safety reasons, not mention exactly where it is in Massachusetts, but it's up. It was given to us. Not really given. We bought it from a group of priests that it was a former rectory, which really, if you see the former rectories and former convents that are sadly now not in use, it really lends itself to be a perfect opportunity for the Catholic Church to help this plight of people being trafficked. So this, what's beautiful is that we have a very unique sister care model. And the sister care model, we have 4 beautiful sisters, nuns from Nigeria, very well versed in human trafficking, sadly, from Nigeria, but they were trained here. They went through a training in the United States and then went on an internship and worked. And now they're ready to open up the O'Connell House to victims. We have trained the local healthcare system and so they'll be identifying, and we'll be their resource for them. We've also made friends with the local FBI, local law enforcement, local Homeland Security. And but it would be irresponsible to open it up without having at least 1 to 2 years of operating costs covered. And we are far below that because this was an older building that had a lot of renovations and a lot of repairs. So we've depleted a lot of the funds. We still have a little kitty, but we are shy of about $750,000. So if anyone is generous, has a generous heart and a generous pocket, wallet, we would love to get donations, and that would go a long way so we can open it up to serve women faster who are in need.
And where do people go?
It's also women that are pregnant. There's not many places in the United States that accept women who have needed beds and that were pregnant. They were turned away. So they were forced to go get an abortion, and then they have their bed. We are a Catholic safe home run by sisters who will happily take in and take care of these babies. And we will, we welcome them. So they can, let me see, best thing probably is go to globalstrategicoperatives.org. And we have a pull down on the O'Connell House, and they can give through that. That would be wonderful. But we are really working hard to get this thing opened as fast as possible.
And the point you make about former rectories and convents that are sitting empty, this is something, if Catholics are listening in a particular way, first of all, it seems like history repeating itself with sisters from Nigeria, missionaries, right, where they have lots of vocations, we don't. Coming in and helping our vulnerable, This is what happened with the hospitals and the schools.
Yes.
And so there's definitely a rich history that they're participating in. But another thing that I don't think people realize is, there are wonderful ministries that have maternity homes, but sometimes they can't take a pregnant woman who has children or other children, or
exactly.
A woman who's been sex trafficked.
That's right.
And so and then a lot of the secular organizations will push women toward abortion. I hate to say too, there are Catholic organizations who are basically arms of the government at this point, who they're well-intentioned social workers will push pregnant women toward abortions as well.
Thank you for bringing this up, Kathryn. And one thing I do want to say is that that's one of the reasons we're not accepting a lot of the government grants, because we don't want to be forced. We are a Catholic organization and we are abiding by all Catholic teaching, meaning no abortions and no contraceptives. The contraceptives aren't as much of an issue because I think most, if not all, safe homes, really require no sexual activity on the part of the victim, because that is the source of their trauma. So they heal. Okay,
part of the healing.
That's kind of a no-brainer. However, our sisters are beautiful. They are full habit. They are Orthodox sisters, and I say that because there's good and bad in every organization. So I don't mean to blanket this, but we do know of Catholic organizations, and I will put Catholic in quotation marks, that they have been driven to get an abortion. And that is not what we're going to do. We are going to love them both and love them all. And ours victims can have a child from 2 and under, along with being pregnant. Wow. And the sisters will be loving taking care of them. But this is a big thing, and we've been criticized and we will be criticized, and that's okay, because we're ready for the criticism and we're ready to just love. That's all. And we're ready to follow Jesus's teaching, and we will not and if a woman decides to have an abortion, it's not a prison. She can go out, but she's not welcome back if she has had an abortion. So this is it's an important element. It's an important piece of our who we are, and we don't apologize for it, because there's enough love to go around for them.
Well, and this is a whole nother conversation, and I need to let you go. But the no contraception and the no abortion, that's about loving the woman and loving her child and respecting her motherhood. And it's not a mean, prohibitive kind of thing. It's part of the healing for girl who has been sex trafficked, for Pete's sake,
And may I add, Kathryn, very quickly, that the worst I heard from a victim was that she was in the life for 10 years and she had 17 forced abortions by her traffickers.
Oh my goodness.
We will not, and this is my response to people that aren't Catholic or don't follow our teaching, is that we will not add one little bit more of trauma to her life. And so this is not something that we will do. And it's just horrific what they've been through. The traffickers use the baby as they impregnate them on purpose and leverage the baby for purposes of getting their quotas. And they hurt the baby. If they don't hurt them themselves, it hurts them more that they hurt their baby, and they're even forced abortions. So it's part of the toolbox of the trafficker. And sometimes they have them that their whole family ring is part of the human trafficking. And so they get the girls pregnant, and then they raise the children to be in the trafficking ring. So some of these girls, depending on their age, we team up with Metanoia Manor, who was started by Father Jeffrey Bailly and Father Chuck Swanson in Louisiana. They're the first juvenile Catholic safe home, ages 4 to 18.
Oh dear.
So these girls may not know anything else. That's the only evidence of love they know. So it's an untwisting of all that's been twisted. So yeah.
And these are areas like, I don't know what the numbers are, but obviously children in foster care are vulnerable in the United States.
High risk.
And
very high risk.
And my understanding is traffickers often come from the foster care system.
Right.
Guys who have aged out. And this is something that people of goodwill should be able to get together and work on, regardless of your beliefs about contraception or abortion or anything else.
That's right.
These are vulnerable children that we should all be protecting, working to protect. And Deb O'Hara Rusckowski, thank you for the work that you do. And I hope you don't mind if I say, I mean, you've put personal time and treasure into this. You're not just asking for other people's money. No. You and your husband have put into this.
Yes.
And your whole heart is in it. And it's just, it's beautiful. We run into each other at church now and again, and you're always asking for specific prayers. And it's just an honor to know you and to be able to pray with you and know this work that you're doing. And so again, Global Strategic Operatives, globalstrategicoperatives.org is where you can learn more and contribute and contribute in whatever way. Again, this movie, I would encourage people to see, Sound of Freedom, because it, in a non-gratuitous way, really sounds an alarm and will make us all more aware, and I think make us look differently, like you were saying, Deb, at the airport or wherever it is, not to be, hyper paranoid, but to just, yeah, exactly. I mean, you can tell the difference between your husband and his grandson and someone who looks scared,
Yes. Oh, thank you, Kathryn. It's been a pleasure. I feel likewise, and very blessed to know you. And thank you for sharing even more of this information. It's critical that everybody learn. Yeah. And go see Sound of Freedom for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.